My friends, we begin not with a problem to be solved, nor with a condition to be corrected, but with an observation so simple that it is usually overlooked. It is the most common phrase spoken by human beings, yet it is the most powerful declaration that can ever pass through consciousness. Those two words "I am" are spoken countless times a day, often without thought, without awareness, without reverence for what is being invoked. And yet, those two words stand at the very center of human experience. They govern the quality of our days, the nature of our relationships, the rise and fall of our peace, and even the body itself. Every time you say "I am," something is being claimed, something is being accepted, something is being established as identity. Scripture does not say, "As a man thinks, so is his circumstance." It says, "As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he." Identity, not events, determines experience. And identity is always declared silently or aloud through the use of "I am." Now notice this carefully. Most people never say "I am" and stop. They say, "I am afraid. I am anxious. I am tired. I am overwhelmed. I am sick. I am struggling." And these statements are made casually, as though they were harmless descriptions of passing states. But they are not descriptions. They are identifications. They are not observations of experience. They are acts of ownership. The moment the words "I am" are joined to a condition, consciousness has accepted that condition as selfhood. This is why anxiety appears to rule human life, not because the world is dangerous, not because circumstances are unstable, but because identity has been misplaced. The human mind has been trained almost from infancy to believe that "I am" refers to a body, a history, a personality, a set of emotions, a chain of experiences, and so the human being walks through life carrying an invisible burden, declaring again and again, "I am this, I am that," never realizing that each declaration is shaping the very world he lives in. The Master understood this. When Moses stood before the burning bush and asked for a name, the answer was not a title, not a description, not a role. It was simply, "I am that I am." No adjective followed. No condition was attached. It was being revealing itself as being. And when Jesus walked the hills of Galilee, he did not say, "I am a teacher," or "I am a healer," or "I am a reformer." He said, "Before Abraham was, I am." And again, "I am the way, the truth, and the life," not as a personal claim, but as a revelation of the one presence expressing itself. Here is where we must pause, because the human mind immediately wants to take this teaching and use it. It wants to improve life with it. It wants to turn "I am" into a better statement. I am calm. I am confident. I am successful. But that is not what is being revealed here. The issue is not whether the statement after "I am" is negative or positive. The issue is whether "I am" is being used at all to describe a personal self. When "I am" is used to define a person, fear is inevitable. Why? Because the person is temporary, vulnerable, and changeable. If I believe that I am this body, then I must fear disease. If I believe that I am my emotions, then I must fear loss. If I believe that I am my circumstances, then I must fear change. Anxiety is not a flaw in human character, It is the logical outcome of false identification. The scriptures tell us, "Be still and know that I am God." Notice what is not said. It does not say, "Be busy and become better." It does not say, "Strive and improve your situation." It says, "Be still." Why? Because stillness is the only state in which false identification loosens its grip, and it says, "Know that I am God." Not know that God will help you, not know that God will change conditions, but know I am God. In other words, discover the true nature of I am before attaching it to anything else. Most of the world's distress comes from the unconscious use of holy words. The name of God is taken in vain, not by profanity, but by misidentification. Every time I am is joined to fear, lack, or limitation. The name of God is being used to support an illusion. This is why the first commandment is not moral, it is metaphysical. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Any identity apart from the one I am is a false god, and it will always demand sacrifice, peace, joy, health, or freedom. So we begin here, not by trying to change what you are saying, but by becoming aware that I am is not a personal possession. It is not a tool for self-definition. It is not a psychological affirmation. It is the name of being itself. And until this is recognized, the human experience will continue to rise and fall with every condition that passes through thought. We are not here to improve the human use of I am. We are here to discover what I am actually is. And that discovery begins the moment we stop using those words unconsciously and allow them to stand naked and complete, without definition, without attachment, without fear. Now we must go a little deeper, because merely noticing the words I am is not enough. We must understand why the way they are used produces fear, tension, and unrest, even in sincere and spiritually minded people. Until this is seen clearly, anxiety will continue to appear as something mysterious, something personal, something to be fought or managed. But anxiety is neither mysterious nor personal. It is mechanical. It is lawful. It is the inevitable effect of a false premise. The human sense of I am is always centered in separation. It assumes, without question, that there is a self here and a world out there, a thinker here and conditions out there, a body here and forces acting upon it. From this assumption, fear must arise, because anything that believes itself to be separate must also believe itself to be vulnerable. A separated self must protect itself, defend itself, improve itself, and secure itself. And this constant effort to survive as a personal entity is what the world calls anxiety. Notice that anxiety does not come and go according to circumstances. Many people feel anxious in safety and peaceful in danger. Others feel anxious even when nothing is wrong. This alone should tell us that anxiety is not caused by conditions. It is caused by identity placed in the wrong location. The moment I am is believed to be a person located in a body, confined to a mind, subject to time. Fear enters automatically. No sin is required. No trauma is necessary. Separation itself is enough. The scriptures tell us the carnal mind is enmity against God. This does not mean the human mind is evil. It means the human mind, believing itself to be a separate knower, is in conflict with reality. The carnal mind always says, I am something. God says, I am. One speaks from form, the other from being. One begins with limitation, the other knows no boundary. When consciousness accepts the human sense of I am, it automatically accepts the carnal mind as ruler, and anxiety is its language. Here is something that must be understood without judgment. Anxiety is not a failure of faith. It is not proof that one has not prayed enough or meditated deeply enough. Anxiety is simply the signal that identity has drifted back into the personal sense. The moment you feel anxious, it is not because something terrible is about to happen. It is because I am has quietly attached itself to a thought, a role, a responsibility, or a future outcome. The human sense of I am always lives in time. It says, I was, I am becoming, I might be. It lives in memory and anticipation. And where time governs identity, peace cannot remain. Peace exists only in being, and being is always now. That is why the Master said, take no thought for the morrow. He was not offering moral advice. He was revealing the nature of reality. The morrow does not exist in I am. Only the personal self lives there. Observe how quickly anxiety dissolves when attention drops out of time. In moments of deep stillness, in sudden beauty, in unexpected silence, fear vanishes, not because problems are solved, but because the personal I is absent. In those moments, there is awareness without definition, presence without effort. And for that brief instant, I am stands alone, unclaimed by thought. That is why peace feels natural and anxiety feels exhausting. Peace is the native state of being. Anxiety is the labor of pretending to be separate. The human mind tries to cure anxiety by controlling thoughts, managing emotions, or improving circumstances. But this is like rearranging furniture in a house built on sand. The foundation remains false. As long as I am is believed to be personal, every solution will be temporary, and fear will always return in another form. One fear may leave, but another will take its place, because the root has not been touched. Let us be very clear here. The infinite way does not teach how to make the human self calmer. It teaches how to see through the human self altogether, not by destroying it, not by fighting it, but by recognizing that it was never the source of life to begin with. The personal sense of I am is not an enemy. It is a mistaken assumption. And mistaken assumptions dissolve when truth is seen, not when they are attacked. When identity rests in the human sense, life feels heavy, responsibility feels personal, outcomes feel urgent, mistakes feel dangerous. But when identity shifts even slightly away from the personal center, something remarkable happens. Life continues, actions continue, decisions are made, yet the weight is gone. Scripture describes this perfectly. I live, yet not I, but Christ liveth in me. This is not poetry. It is not symbolism. It is the description of consciousness freed from the burden of personal authorship. So anxiety is not something to be healed. It is something to be understood. It is the echo of a false claim to identity. And the moment this is seen, not intellectually, but inwardly, the struggle begins to loosen. You do not have to push anxiety away. You only have to notice that it has no place to stand when I am is no longer personal. This brings us to the turning point of our work, where we must learn to discern between I am, used as description, and I am, known as being. Without this distinction, all spiritual effort remains human. With it, effort begins to fall away. Now we arrive at a distinction so vital that without it, all spiritual practice remains human effort, and with it, effort begins to dissolve. This distinction is not theological. It is not philosophical. It is experiential. It is the difference between I am used as description and I am realized as being. Until this is clearly seen, the words I am will continue to serve the personal sense, even when spoken in the language of spirituality. When the human mind says, I am tired, I am confused, I am peaceful, or even I am spiritual, it is using I am as a label maker. It is attaching being to form. It is fastening the infinite to the finite. And no matter how refined the label may be, the act itself reduces identity to something that can change, improve, decline, or be lost. This is why even positive spiritual identities eventually lead to fear. Anything that can be defined can also be threatened. But I am, in its true sense, is never a description. It is never followed by an adjective. It is never improved, corrected, or completed. I am is being aware of itself. It is presence without perimeter. It is life, conscious of life. And the moment I am is allowed to stand alone, without explanation, without ownership, without direction. Consciousness begins to feel a release it did not know it was seeking. You see, the personal sense of life is always asking, who am I? But being never asks that question. Being knows itself by being itself. The question, who am I, arises only when identity has already slipped into form. The answer, therefore, is never found in thought. It is found in the cessation of the question itself. This is why the Master did not say, figure out who you are. He said, abide in me. Abiding is not thinking. Abiding is resting. It is remaining without movement. It is the awareness that does not go out to name, define, or improve. Abide in me, and I in you, he said, not as poetry, but as instruction for consciousness. When identity abides, it stops wandering into description. And where identity stops wandering, peace begins. The human sense wants to use I am. It wants to employ it for healing, for success, for transformation. But the infinite way reveals something startling. I am is not a means to an end. I am is the end of means. The moment you try to use I am, you have already turned it into something other than what it is. Being cannot be used. Being can only be recognized. Recognition is very different from declaration. Declaration is effort. Recognition is surrender. Declaration says, I am trying to be something. Recognition quietly realizes, I am. And in that realization, something deep relaxes. The body may still move, the mind may still function, but the false center, the one that claimed authorship, control, and responsibility, steps aside. This is why the infinite way does not teach constant affirmation of I am this or I am that. It teaches reverence for the word I am by refusing to attach it to appearances. I am that I am does not explain God. It silences explanation. It leaves consciousness standing in awe, not in control. And awe is the beginning of wisdom. Here is a subtle point that must be grasped gently. When you stop describing yourself, you do not disappear. Life does not stop functioning. Decisions are still made. Words are still spoken. But they arise from a different center. They arise from being rather than from a person trying to become something. Scripture hints at this when it says, "It is not ye that speak, but the Spirit of your Father which speaketh in you." Notice it does not say the Spirit helps you speak better. It says the Spirit speaks. This is the freedom that comes when I am is no longer used as description. Anxiety fades not because it has been conquered, but because it no longer has an identity to attach to. Fear requires a personal I. When the personal I is not being fed, fear starves naturally. You do not have to resist it. You only have to stop giving it a name to live under. So the work before us is not to monitor every thought or correct every statement. That would only strengthen the personal sense. The work is much simpler and therefore much more difficult for the human mind. To let I am be what it is, without interference, without definition, without direction. In that letting, something ancient and familiar begins to reemerge, the quiet authority of being itself. And from this point, we are prepared to see why so many well-meaning spiritual practices fail, and why even sincere affirmation often increases the very anxiety it hopes to remove. For once the distinction between being and description is seen, we can no longer mistake effort for realization. At this point, many sincere students ask a reasonable question. If the misuse of I am creates anxiety, why not simply replace negative statements with positive ones? Why not affirm peace instead of fear, abundance instead of lack, health instead of illness? On the surface, this seems wise, and for a time, it may even appear to work. But if we look deeply, and honesty is required here, we will see why affirmation, no matter how sincere, eventually exhausts itself and often leaves the individual more strained than before. Affirmations fail not because they are wrong in language, but because they are wrong in premise. They begin with the assumption that there is a personal self who must become something else. They say, in effect, I am not yet what I should be, but I am trying to get there by saying the right words. This effort, however refined, still rests upon separation. And wherever separation is accepted, anxiety remains quietly alive beneath the surface. The human mind loves affirmation because it feels active. It feels as though something is being done. There is comfort in repetition, reassurance in positive language, but peace does not come from repetition, and reality is not impressed by insistence. Not by might, nor by power, but by my Spirit, saith the Lord. Spirit is not reached through pressure, mental or emotional. Spirit is revealed when pressure ceases. Many have discovered that affirmations must be constantly maintained. Miss a day, and fear returns. Miss a moment, and doubt reappears. This alone reveals their weakness. Truth does not require maintenance. Being does not require defense. Anything that must be constantly asserted has not been realized. It is still being argued for. And argument, even with oneself, is the language of division. There is another subtle danger here. When affirmations fail to bring lasting peace, the individual often concludes, I am not doing it well enough. My faith is weak. My consciousness is not high enough. And so the burden doubles. Not only is there anxiety about life, but now there is anxiety about spirituality itself. The seeker becomes a striver, measuring progress, watching thoughts, correcting language, policing inner states. This is not liberation. This is spiritual labor. The infinite way reveals something radically different. Truth is not something you make happen. It is something you stop interfering with. When the master said, "My yoke is easy and my burden is light," he was not speaking to those who had perfected technique. He was speaking to those who had laid down personal effort. The yoke becomes heavy only when the personal self insists on pulling it. Affirmations still assume a doer. They assume a thinker who must manage consciousness. But in reality, consciousness is not managed, it is uncovered. The sun does not need to be affirmed into brightness. Clouds must simply move aside. In the same way, peace is not created by saying peaceful words. It is revealed when false identity loosens its hold. Let us be very clear, lest this be misunderstood. The infinite way does not condemn affirmations. It outgrows them. Just as a child may use training wheels for a season, there comes a moment when they are no longer helpful. To cling to them beyond that moment is not wisdom. It is fear of letting go. And fear of letting go is precisely what keeps anxiety alive. The great mystics did not affirm themselves into freedom. They surrendered into it. They did not say, "I am becoming divine." They realized, "I have never been anything else." This realization did not come through effort, but through stillness. In returning and rest shall ye be saved. In quietness and confidence shall be your strength. Quietness, not assertion. Rest, not repetition. When affirmation is dropped, the mind feels exposed at first. There is a sense of groundlessness, as though one has stepped off familiar support. This is not danger. It is transition. The personal self fears silence because silence does not support identity. Silence does not echo back the story of me. And yet it is precisely in this silence that the deeper truth begins to make itself known. Here, anxiety often makes its final stand. It says, "If I stop affirming, I will lose control." But control was never real to begin with. Control belongs to the personal sense, and the personal sense is the very thing that produces fear. To release control is not to fall into chaos, it is to fall into order. He shall keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee, stayed not busy, stayed not correcting. So we do not replace negative I am statements with positive ones. We go deeper. We withdraw I am from description altogether. We let it rest where it belongs, in being itself. And when this happens, something astonishing is discovered. Peace does not need to be declared. It is simply present. It does not rise and fall with thought. It does not argue with fear. It stands quietly as the very ground of consciousness. This prepares us now for the central revelation, the unveiling of the impersonal I am, untouched by human history, untroubled by circumstance, forever whole. Without this revelation, all spiritual work remains partial. With it, work begins to fall away. Now we come to the heart of the matter, the point toward which all previous understanding quietly leads. Until this is glimpsed, even briefly, spiritual life remains a journey with effort, and peace appears only in intervals. But when this is seen, not believed, not reasoned, but recognized, the search itself begins to loosen. This is the revelation of the impersonal I am. The human mind resists this at first, because it has been trained to think in terms of persons, personal God, personal self, personal destiny. And yet, throughout Scripture, whenever God is revealed, personality dissolves. At the burning bush, there is no description of form, no character, no history, only this: I am that I am. No beginning, no becoming, no opposite. Pure being, revealing itself as presence. Impersonal does not mean cold. It does not mean distant. It does not mean abstract. It means unlimited. It means untouched by human fluctuation. The impersonal I am is closer than breath, yet not confined to a body. It is intimate without being possessive. It is personal only in the sense that it is individualized, but never owned. When Jesus said, I and my Father are one, he was not elevating a person. He was dissolving personhood. He was revealing that the life speaking through him was not his. And when he said the Son can do nothing of himself, he was not expressing humility. He was stating a metaphysical fact. There is no personal doer in I am. There is only being expressing itself. This is why fear cannot survive true recognition of I am. Fear requires an owner. It needs a someone to protect. But the impersonal I am has nothing to defend. It is not born and therefore cannot die. It does not succeed and therefore cannot fail. It does not acquire and therefore cannot lose. When identity rests here, anxiety finds no footing. The human sense wants to take this revelation and apply it. How do I use this in my life? How do I make it work? But that question belongs to the personal sense, and it must gently be laid aside. The impersonal I am does not work for you. It lives as you, without agenda, without effort, without condition. In him we live and move and have our being, not with him, not by him, in him. This is the great reversal that so few accept at first. We have been taught to seek God, to reach God, to please God. But the impersonal I am reveals that God is not an object of pursuit. God is the ground of being. You do not move toward I am. You awaken within it. An awakening is not an act. It is the cessation of the belief that you were ever outside. At first, this realization may feel strangely ordinary. There are no fireworks, no visions, no dramatic shift in circumstance, and yet something profound has changed. The center of gravity has moved. Life is no longer being lived from a person trying to manage existence, but from being expressing itself effortlessly. Scripture hints at this when it says, I will work, and who shall let it? When I am is recognized, life moves of its own accord. Here, silence becomes sacred, not as a technique, but as a natural state. Silence is not the absence of sound. It is the absence of the personal narrator. In this silence, guidance is not sought, it arises. Peace is not requested, it is felt. Supply is not demonstrated, it unfolds. Before they call, I will answer. And while they are yet speaking, I will hear. Not because requests are answered faster, but because the sense of separation has thinned. This is why the Infinite Way places such emphasis on receptivity. Receptivity is not passivity. It is alert stillness. It is the willingness to let go of the false claim to authorship and allow being to be what it already is. In receptivity, there is no attempt to become spiritual. There is only the quiet recognition that life is already whole. The impersonal I am does not belong to saints more than sinners, to mystics more than seekers. It is not earned by discipline, nor lost by failure. It is the same I am shining through every life, whether recognized or not. The difference between bondage and freedom is not possession, but recognition. The light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. Darkness is not evil, it is simply unawareness. So we do not strive to hold this revelation. Holding is effort. We allow it to hold us. We rest again and again in the simple awareness of being, without naming it, without directing it, without claiming it, and slowly, gently, life reorganizes itself around this new center, not by force, but by grace. From this point forward, the question is no longer, how do I get rid of anxiety? The question dissolves, because anxiety is seen for what it is, a shadow cast by mistaken identity. And when the light of I am is allowed to stand unobstructed, the shadow fades of its own accord. When the impersonal I am is even faintly recognized, something begins to happen that the human mind cannot explain, because it is not a process and it is not an achievement. Anxiety does not gradually improve. It simply loses its center. It is not healed. It is displaced, not pushed away, not denied, not reasoned out of existence, but rendered unnecessary. You see, anxiety has no life of its own. It feeds entirely upon identification. It requires a claimant. It must have someone who says, "This fear is mine." The moment that ownership weakens, anxiety becomes like a voice echoing in an empty room, still sounding for a moment, but without authority, without substance, without direction. And in time, even the echo fades. This is why recognition, not treatment, is the infinite way. Recognition does not go after anxiety. It goes after the one who thinks he has anxiety. When that one is seen to be a mistaken sense of self, fear has nowhere to lodge. Scripture puts this in a single, quiet statement. Perfect love casteth out fear. Love here is not emotion, it is oneness. Fear cannot exist where there is no second. Many people wait for anxiety to disappear before they trust God, but the order is always the reverse. Trust does not come because fear is gone. Fear goes because trust has no opposite. And trust, in its highest sense, is not believing that things will work out. It is resting in the fact that being is already complete, and therefore nothing is required to secure it. Observe something important. When anxiety dissolves through recognition, circumstances do not necessarily change immediately. Bills may still be unpaid. The body may still carry sensations. Decisions may still need to be made. But the weight is gone. The sense of personal responsibility, that heavy feeling of I must manage life quietly lifts, and with its lifting comes clarity, not confusion, movement, not paralysis. This is why Jesus could sleep in a storm. He did not deny the storm. He did not affirm calm weather. He simply was not living from the personal sense that believed it was subject to the storm. He lived from I am. And I am does not battle appearances. It outlives them. When I am is recognized, fear is no longer taken personally. Thoughts may arise, but they are seen as passing clouds, not as definitions of self. Sensations may appear, but they are not interpreted as threats. The nervous system relaxes not because it has been trained, but because it is no longer being asked to protect a false identity. This is what the psalmist meant when he wrote, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil." Notice it does not say the valley disappears, it says fear disappears. And it disappears not through courage, but through recognition. For thou art with me, not will be. Art, presence, recognized, dissolves fear instantly, because fear is always about absence. There comes a point in this realization where you may notice anxiety trying to return, but something is different now. It no longer convinces. It no longer persuades. It knocks, but there is no one inside to answer. This is not resistance. Resistance would give it power. This is indifference born of understanding. The impersonal I am does not argue with shadows. And here's the grace of it. You do not have to maintain this recognition. Maintenance is effort, and effort belongs to the personal sense. Recognition deepens naturally as it is lived. Sometimes it is clear, sometimes it seems distant. But even when it seems distant, it is not gone. Being does not come and go. Awareness of being may fluctuate, but being itself is constant. So we do not watch anxiety to see if it has left. We do not monitor our peace. We rest. We listen. We return again and again, not to a statement, not to a technique, but to the quiet awareness of presence. Return unto thy rest, O my soul. The soul does not create rest, it returns to it. In this resting, life continues. Problems resolve not always in the way the mind expects, but always in the way that preserves harmony. Guidance appears not shouted, not dramatic, but unmistakable. And gradually, without fanfare, anxiety becomes something remembered rather than experienced. Not because you defeated it, but because you outgrew the identity that sustained it. This prepares us now for the most practical aspect of this teaching, not a method, but a way of returning to I am in the midst of daily life, without effort and without strain. For realization must be lived, not protected. When the word practice is used, the human mind immediately imagines discipline, repetition, and improvement. But the practice we speak of here is not an activity added to life. It is a return from distraction. It is not something you do to reach I am. It is what happens when you stop wandering away from it. In truth, there is only one practice in the infinite way, the practice of non-interference. Returning to I am does not require posture, time, or ritual. It requires only a willingness to pause, sometimes for a moment, sometimes for a breath, and to let awareness rest without direction. You do not go inward to find something. You simply stop going outward to name, judge, or fix. And in that stopping, something is already present. This return often happens spontaneously. A sentence ends, a thought loses momentum. There is a brief gap. In that gap, awareness stands free, without history, without future. That is, I am. Not dramatic, not mystical, not impressive, simply present. And the more reverence you give to that gap, not by holding it, but by not rushing past it, the more natural it becomes. Many students try to hold I am. That too is effort. I am does not need to be held. It is that which holds you. The return is gentle. It may happen 100 times a day, for a second at a time. Each return loosens the habit of personal identity. Each return weakens the false claim that I must manage life Scripture calls this praying without ceasing, not because words are always spoken, but because awareness remains available. Even in activity, even in conversation, there can be a quiet knowing beneath the surface, a sense that life is living itself. When this is glimpsed, strain begins to fall away from action. Doing becomes lighter, simpler, more accurate. And if you forget, if you become lost again in thought, emotion, or fear, nothing has been lost. There is no failure here. Forgetting is part of the human rhythm. Remembering is the grace that follows. Each remembering is enough. Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. We do not store recognition. We live it. Now the question arises, how do we live in the world without rebuilding the personal I again and again? The answer is not withdrawal. It is discernment. We learn to use words without letting words use us. We learn to act without letting action define us. In daily life, language is necessary. We say, I am going to work. I am speaking with you. I am tired. These are functional expressions, not metaphysical claims, unless consciousness attaches identity to them. The danger is not in language. It is in believing that language describes who you are. You may say, I am sad, but inwardly there is a quiet knowing. Sadness is appearing. It is not selfhood. You may say, I am responsible for this task, but inwardly there is an awareness. Responsibility is an activity, not an identity. This inward knowing keeps life fluid. It prevents the crystallization of the false self. Guidance becomes clearer here. When the personal self is no longer defending its image, intuition flows freely. Decisions are made without strain. You may still weigh options, but there is no desperation. Action arises naturally, and when it is complete, it releases itself. This is what is meant by casting thy burden upon the Lord. The burden is not the task. It is the belief that the task defines you. It is important now to distinguish between two states that are often confused. Human calm is a psychological condition. It depends on order, predictability, and favorable circumstances. It comes and goes. Spiritual peace, on the other hand, is independent of conditions. It is the atmosphere of being. Human calm feels fragile. It must be protected. It fears interruption. Spiritual peace is immovable. It does not resist movement. It outlives it. This is why the Master could say, Peace I leave with you. My peace I give unto you, not as the world giveth. The world gives calm. Spirit reveals peace. When identity rests in I am, peace is present even when emotions fluctuate. You may feel grief, yet not be broken. You may face uncertainty, yet not be shaken. Peace is not the absence of feeling, it is the absence of false center. It does not numb life, it steadies it. Here, the need to protect peace disappears. You do not manage it, you trust it. And trust deepens as you see, again and again, that peace remains when conditions do not cooperate. This trust is not belief, it is familiarity. You have touched something real. And now we return to where we began, but not as we began. We return to the words I am, no longer as tools, no longer as declarations, but as revelation. We see now that seeking was never for peace or healing or supply. Seeking was for identity, and identity was never lost, only mislocated. When I am is recognized, seeking ends naturally. not because all questions are answered, but because the one who questioned has been gently laid to rest. Life continues. Learning continues. Growth continues. But the anxious search for completion dissolves. He that drinketh of the water that I shall give him shall never thirst, not because he has more water, but because thirst belonged to separation. There is nothing here to conclude, nothing to summarize, nothing to take away. Truth does not need a closing statement. It needs space. So we leave this teaching where it belongs, not in thought, but in awareness, not in memory, but in presence. Be still and know that I am.